Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this part two of Cali Lichter's presentation from Libertyville High School. We're very excited to see what she has to share with us. This is the effectiveness of political campaigns on Instagram. It's a project that Cali has been working on with her mentor through the mentor matching engine on ISDI's platform. We are very excited to see the rest of Cali's presentation. So without further ado, I am going to share the screen and take myself out.
We can start from the third slide because I already went over the second slide. Okay, third time's a charm, everybody. Okay, in order to make suggestions as to what is the most effective way of using Instagram for campaign purposes, I created a study that focused on the effects that Instagram had on the voting habits of young voters. In doing so, I would be able to make suggestions as to what works for political campaigns on the platform and what doesn't work. That is how I came up with my research question. What is the most effective way to run a political campaign on Instagram to target youth voters ages 17 to 23 years old? Next slide. My study did not go into other demographics other than young voters, as well as any other social media sites other than Instagram. Another delimitation is that this study is not party specific and does not go into specific candidates, rather an overall strategy for any one political candidate regardless of party. The study aimed to provide a basic political campaign strategy aimed at youth voters on a general basis so it can be applied to any one candidate from any party/position in government. Next slide. Ahead, I'm going to cover 4 areas. First, I will cover my method. After that, I will present my findings of my survey, then my conclusions, and finally, my final thoughts. Next slide. Here's my method. Next slide. In this quantitative case study, I decided that the most efficient way to collect my data was by sending out a mass survey to my targeted demographic. Since this is a quantitative case study, it isn't focused on the individual as it is just getting general statistics. I broke my survey into 3 parts: general demographic questions, Instagram-specific questions, and political Instagram ad preferences. Using the research I found and prior personal knowledge, I started by obtaining 14 Instagram posts from current presidential candidates at the time of the survey, January 2020. I chose posts that had 1 or more qualities in rank order of importance. Number 1 was an Instagram feed post, not a video, link, story post, or moving picture. 2 had some sort of graphical element to it, whether it was a quote, graphic, or saying. And 3 had some sort of general appeal, i.e. was well engaged with based off of the politician's following. Next slide. The survey starts out with general demographic questions so I could get a feel of who was taking the survey. I decided to make the political party question optional since I understand that it is a loaded question that not a lot of people feel comfortable with answering. Even though political parties aren't important to the research as a whole, it's just another demographic piece I can further look into. Next slide. The second section is on Instagram-specific questions, such as usage and political engagement. This allowed me to see if there was a trend in how my participants used Instagram or if the answers were different for each person. It also allowed me to see if the participants were more civically engaged on the platform or not. Next question. The final section was the meat and potatoes of my study, where I gave side-by-side photos and asked which one is more appealing. I tried my hardest to Photoshop out references to the original candidates since the study is not party-specific, but I couldn't Photoshop every single detail out. I added a disclaimer and directions to ensure that this wasn't a political test. The posts were shown as follows. Next slide. 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 My survey was sent out to people in my chosen demographic through my school, social media, and other avenues. I didn't have to focus on individuals, therefore there was no identifying questions such as email collection or name on my form. Initially, I thought that there was going to be no strong preference between any of the posts, but through the survey, I saw that there were strong preferences for certain posts over others, which helped me analyze my data and draw strong connections. Next slide. To fully analyze the results of the study, I needed to analyze each component individually since each photo has a different graphic element that I chose to study. I analyzed and organized the data through the graphs that Google Sheets supplies in the responses section. Next slide. Through my preliminary questions, I got a good picture of who was taking my survey. Most of the participants were younger and female identifying, but there were a few who were older along with male or other identifying. The majority of the takers were Democrat at 53.1%, Republican coming at 24.5%, and Independent no preference coming at 11.2% each. My data was scattered for Instagram use. There was a large range of Instagram users with an equal split of engagement with politics and the app in general. Next slide. The real data that I was analyzing came from the last section of my survey. Here was the breakdown for each post. Next slide. 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 And next slide. And now for my conclusions. Next slide. Through the breakdown of the different statistics, I came up with some general conclusions. The first was when it comes to having a candidate in a post, most prefer to have the candidate to be the main focus rather than have whatever graphical element be the focus. In the second and fifth question, there was a majority lead of preference for the right photo, which had the candidate as the main focus. The second was that when it comes to just plain statistics and graphics without any people, most of the survey takers preferred busy. They want the colors and the flashy big graphics. And the final is that when it comes to slogans, nothing really matters. Even though I only had one post about slogans, it was a near 50-50 split. From this question, I could generalize that slogan posts are the least important of the different graphics. Taking into account of what I found, this would be an ideal Instagram account. Next slide. Some limitations to my findings are my targeted pool and my social media site. My research has a relatively smaller scope. Even though Instagram is one of, if not the largest social media sites in the current age, that could change. Also, even though I believe that my demographic is very valuable, campaigners might not. It would be short-sighted to only run a campaign towards my targeted demographic. You need to make a campaign towards everyone, make it inclusive. Further research that I would do is run a mock campaign on Instagram using what I found to test out my conclusions in the real world. Since that would take a month or more, I do not have the time. But it would be interesting to see how my findings would play out. Next slide. And thank you so much for watching my presentation. That's all I have.
Great job, Callie. I thought that was so interesting, and I appreciate you bearing with us through these technical difficulties. Now that we have heard from Callie, we have a panel standing behind here who have some questions for you. Panelists, feel free to wave your hand and I will kind of drag you into the stream or just shout it out. We're going to start with Kristen Perkins. Kristen, you are live here. I'm going to take myself out of the stream, but feel free to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Callie. My name is Kristen Perkins. I work for Northwestern University and then also work with ISTI on the STEM Challenge work. So I want to say, first of all, your presentation was great. I also say that I appreciate the professional way that you handled the hiccup with your presentation. You know, I know that it's hard to handle those, especially when it's a live event, but you handled it with grace under pressure and did a beautiful job with that. I was really interested in the content that you were presenting as you were talking about your work. And so I have two questions for you. The first question is just to ask, how did you come up with this idea in order to to take this focus for your project?
I like to say that I have three big passions in life. One is news. The other is politics, and the third is youth engagement and voting. And so at the beginning of the year, when I started the AP research class, when our teacher, Dr. Reef, was like, you can choose any topic in the world, I wanted to choose something that focused on voter engagement and something with that. And I was also in AP government and politics at the time. So I'm like, perfect, I can just use information from there. And at first I was just going to do like how to get more youth engaged, but that wasn't really like specific enough. And then I thought, I'm in charge of several Instagram accounts for clubs that I'm at my school, and I'm going into like broadcast journalism and PR. So I thought I should just take my like separate passion and do that. Like, how can I use Instagram, which is a social media site that many kids my age use, to influence them to vote? Because I feel like that's the most efficient way to get kids my age to vote, because they don't really, which is really sad.
Yeah, great. I love that you have those passions in your life and that you were able to build on those to build out a research project that you were interested in. And it was really clear as you were presenting that the subject was something that you were passionate about, and that shined through in your enthusiasm about the presentation and about the work itself, which was great. So my next question, or my last question for you then, before I hand it off to other panelists, is who else who else is doing work in this space? Are there other people or researchers, organizations who are also asking some of these similar questions about how Instagram, connects with politics, connects with potential voters in your age block? Any of those sort of threads?
Well, one thing that like really inspired me was what a lot of my friends are doing. There's a lot of like a few of my friends who are in the research class with me work with different organizations to get like youth engaged and involved in voting, which really, I guess, drove me a little bit. And when I was looking up different like prior research for my literature review, because that's a required part of the research project, I found that there was a big gap, that there was a lot of people either trying to use Instagram to get just voters in general, like just people to vote in general. And there was a lot of people who were doing research on how to get youth like voters engaged, but there was no real like one person who was trying to get like make the connection between Instagram and youth voters. So that's why I decided it was a good topic, since there isn't really anyone doing that. There's people doing one thing or the other, but not really combining the two.
That's great. Just to take it to a meta level, those are two really great skills to hold on to as you move on in your, in your academic career, is, finding something that you're passionate about and building a research project around that. And then, mining the gaps, finding where the gaps are, and then finding, looking for opportunities there to dig deeper. I love it. Great job.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I really appreciate the questions. As you said, we are going to move on to a second panelist now. Lila, it looks like you have a question. I'm going to put you in the stream. All right.
Hi, Callie. Hi.
Hi.
This was awesome. I am really excited about this. And I feel like there's so many directions that you could take this. One thing that I thought was good that you did was talk about what you would envision being your sort of like next step, or how you would continue this research to sort of further learn about the topic that you're interested in. You mentioned wanting to do sort of a fake campaign on Instagram to test it. So I want to dig into that a little bit. How would you envision doing that? What kinds of conclusions would you be hoping to draw? Are you thinking about how to strengthen the arguments that you have in place? Or one thing that I would have been interested in seeing from the data that you collected is what some of the breakdowns are. So you showed preferences for each candidate for each ad. I'd be interested in whether any of those preferences sort of track with political party or gender identity or any of that. And in any case, so if you could speak to how you would, like, what more you are hoping to learn from whatever further research you would do, or how you would do that for further research.
Just touching on the like specific breakdown part just a little bit. I was working with limited time at this point because originally this was for the AP research class, and before the whole entire COVID-19 situation got a little out of hand, the paper and everything was due like early April, like I think like April 3rd or something. And this presentation was going over spring break, and unfortunately Google Sheets doesn't have like the breakdown, and I had like over 100 participants, so I wasn't able to like go through with that. But that would be—
This is not at all.
No, I know.
This was just,
Yeah.
This is an interesting topic, and there are a lot of things to dive into here.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to criticism of this.
Yeah, if I had more time, that'd be really interesting to like go through and like check that out. And I was talking about this because I obviously had this done a couple weeks ago. So when I was in class, I would like talk with my friends about this, or like outside of research, I would ask people about this. I was going to do 2 separate Instagram accounts, kind of, I guess, identical stock candidates, and just post different posts based off of like the statistics and information, maybe like one account with all the posts that didn't do so well, that weren't preferred by the people who took my survey, and on the other account it would be posts that went along with like what people in my survey preferred. And I was just going to push that out to my friends and other people like through the class of 2020 at my high school, through social media sites, and just through my contacts across the country, which is how I pushed my survey out. I just tell them like, hey, follow these 2 accounts. When you see these posts on your feed, like it, interact, and comment with them, just based on like what you prefer and what you don't prefer. And that's how I was basically going to run it, which is kind of similarly how I run the Instagram accounts for my clubs. I run one for our theater group at our school, and I run one for this service club that I'm a really big part of, Caring for Cambodia. So I decided that would be the best way to run the 2 Instagram accounts. Obviously, I don't have the resources or anything like a president, but I feel like through that way of pushing it out to people and saying like, just leave your biases behind, or I guess have your biases and just choose which one you feel like, that would be the way that I could mock that presidential campaign Instagram style, but on my own 18-year-old high school self level.
Yeah. It's really great to see somebody, thinking through what all these steps would be, even if you're not able to actually execute. A lot of people cannot execute the variety of things that they want to do, but it's really great to see your thought process. Good work.
Lila, thank you so much for your questions. I thought those were great. I am going to hide you and see if we can include 2 more panelists in this conversation. Yes, I'm going to put Jenny Kopak in the stream. And Jenny, if you can introduce yourself and then ask your question whenever you're ready.
Hey, great job. And also great job keeping your sense of humor during your little tech snafu. That is a skill that will serve you well throughout the rest of your life. Great and interesting and timely research question, and good job also keeping going when school was disrupted. I'm really proud of you that you were able to keep this going. So one thing that I think is so interesting and maybe a little bit tangential to your study is not only the effectiveness of political campaigns in the social media space, but how do you deal with the issue of disinformation and believability? Because clearly, sure, these are real accounts that you're looking at, but there's lots of Finstas out there, and there's lots of spam, and there's lots of bots. So did you discuss at all with your peers or through your research any of the disinformation that can come out on social media?
So my paper that I did is around like 23 pages long. So I did reference that a little, but it just didn't fit in with this like small presentation. But I didn't really want to go too much into that because that's like misinformation and like, I guess, fake news is such a beast of its own. I didn't want it to take away. I just wanted my presentation to be a like quantitative case study, just all like statistics and no qualitative things, no people's like thoughts, feelings, information. I just wanted to be straightforward in just this one path. But misinformation in the news is something that I'm definitely very passionate about. That's one of the reasons why I want to be a broadcast journalist, and that's one of the things that, especially what I'm like seeing now with like my family members and my friends, I'm like, before you like read anything or believe anything, go to different sources about it, because every like news source and every person on the internet, any person who ever lived, skews information, changes information, and you never know what is right and what's wrong, so you should always fact check things. And again, I'm extremely passionate about that. I could talk for hours about fact checking and political literacy or like media literacy and things like that. And that would definitely take away from my project if I put in there, because it would definitely be all consuming. But
well, great. I'm glad that you attacked it from all aspects. You seem like you have a career path set out for yourself already.
I hope so.
That's a great question, Jenny, and something I was wondering about myself. Thank you so much. Let's see, we have one final panelist. I'm going to share Kevin Gates from Microsoft into the screen. And Kevin, if you can introduce yourself briefly and then ask your question.
I can't really hear you. I'm sorry.
Hey, Kevin, I'm not able to hear you as well. If you can turn up your volume a little bit.
Is this better?
That's much better, yes.
All right. Technical. It happens to
Technical
everybody.
difficulties all over.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my name is Kevin Gates. I'm a cloud solution architect with Microsoft in Chicago. So first off, I just wanted to say you did a really good job. Very, I heard someone else say very passionate, and that comes out, and I think that really sets you forward in a very good direction. I had a couple questions. One, could you just recap how you distributed the survey? You mentioned you sent it out basically from yourself to some of your friends and peers.
Again, that's a really large part of my survey. I only have 5 minutes. So I started off, I guess I called it like a 3-layer approach. So the first was I sent the survey out through the class of 2020 email at my school because I guess my peers, my seniors would be the demographic that I was looking for, 17 to 20 years old. So there's one email and it sends it to every senior in our school. So that was the first step. All the seniors got that. And then I made different posts and I posted on my Instagram story and on Snapchat and on just all my social media saying like, hey, if you have the time, please fill out this survey. It's really important. It's for my AP research class. And it will only take like 5 minutes. And I got a lot of responses from the email and then from this posting it on my social media. My friends reposted it on their different social media accounts, which was really nice. And then the third step was I would occasionally like post it every couple of days saying like, hey, if you haven't taken my survey, please take that. And I also sent it to my friends who either like don't go on social media as often, because even though it was about Instagram, I wanted to get everyone's approach, like people who rarely use Instagram and people who use Instagram all the time. So I sent it out to them. I sent like a lot of texts to my cousins who live in Indiana or in Texas or in Arizona. I'm like, hey, please send this to their friends. So it just became a web of people sharing the survey around, which was really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, that was my question, is if you got feedback from different angles and different people spreading it around, which I think is good. Do you think it would be very different in terms of your results if you were talking about something like TikTok versus like a Facebook versus an Instagram? I know you scoped it to Instagram on purpose, but there have been comments around generational usage of Facebook versus some of the newer platforms, but how do you think that would factor in?
One of the reasons why I didn't want to use like Facebook at first, and one of like the earliest developments of my research, this was back in August, I wanted to look at Instagram versus Snapchat versus Facebook, but then I realized that's not really feasible because Snapchat isn't really an information sharing hub. It's more of like a one-on-one experience, and not a lot of kids my age use Facebook. I think I could ask 5 of my friends and maybe one of them uses Facebook. So that's the reason why I chose Instagram. And at the time that I was doing this research or starting this research, which was back in August and September, TikTok wasn't as popular as it became in January. And at that point, I wasn't able to shift gears and move to that platform. But I'm sure that like there's so many like political candidates, famous figures on TikTok now. And it's crazy the amounts of like followers and like likes they get and shares. So I feel like if I ran this like study on a platform like TikTok, my results would be totally different than on Instagram, but I couldn't see into the future, so I did not know in August or September that my main demographic would be mostly using TikTok above any other social media platform.
Okay. I guess maybe real quick, the other thing I'd add is just, you seem to not go towards memes at all, but more just like ads, but was that very deliberate not to incorporate memes into your study?
Well, personally for me, I chose posts straight from, I also like didn't add this in, but I chose it from the pool that was representative at that time. So I drew from posts from, it was Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg, and they didn't have any like memes on their account. They were like the posts that I photoshopped. And I tried to like match it up one-on-one. So like, let's say if like if Andrew Yang had a meme, I wouldn't be able to find like a comparable type of media on anyone else's account. So I want to make it more comparable and representative of what an actual like politician running for presidency would post.
Awesome. Great job, Kelly.
Thank you.
Kevin, great questions. Thanks so much. Unless we have any other questions, those are all four of our panelists. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I really appreciate the time that you took to ask Callie questions. And Callie, thank you so much for your presentation. It was phenomenal. As you can tell from everyone here and all the comments you're already receiving, it's such engaging content. You can tell you're so passionate about it, and we're really excited to see what you do next. So if you have a question for Callie, throw it in the comments, and we look forward to seeing your future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.